Hey, what's up, everyone? Gaming Hearts One here. I'm gonna talk briefly about the Marvel vs. Capcom series and whether or not it's still popular or it's still a thing. And honestly, seeing how Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite did in terms of like sales back in 2017, I wouldn't say that Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite was a failure, but at the same time, it wasn't a massive success like Marvel vs. Capcom 3, mainly because there were elements that was included in Marvel vs. Capcom 3 that wasn't in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. Now, if you look at Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, which came out back in the early part of the teens decade, those two games had a more of a comic book style like feel to it, and it had like a robust roster of characters along with 3-on-3 tag action and all that stuff. And that's something that wasn't in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. It was just 2-on-2 gameplay. And I get that Capcom was trying to go back to its roots from the 90s with X-Men vs. Street Fighter and Marvel vs. Street Fighter and Marvel vs. Capcom 1 with 2-on-2 gameplay. But the thing is, I mean, to go from 3-on-3 gameplay to 2-on-2 gameplay felt like a step backwards now, and a lot of people appreciate the fact that Capcom took like the Infinity Stones that were included in Marvel Superheroes, the arcade game, which I believe came out in the mid 90s. They took that and they included it in this game, and it made for a better gameplay experience. And you also had a storyline, which is a first for any Marvel vs. Capcom games, because normally Marvel vs. Capcom, like the games of the past, like from the 90s and, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 from 2000, there was really no storyline. It was just arcade gameplay with just a bunch of random characters. I believe each character had their own unique ending. But at the same time, I do feel that maybe there was too much emphasis placed on trying to make Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite very different from Marvel vs. Capcom 3. And I think that may have been something that it pretty much hurt the overall expectations a lot of people had for Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. A lot of people appreciate the cinematic cutscenes and all this stuff that was included in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, because it does feel like that Capcom made an effort to pretty much give us something new and different and fresh from what we were used to seeing in the series. But at the same time, they left out elements like, making it seem more like a comic book or more like a arcade looking type of game. And stuff like that kind of like hurt the overall quality of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, even though there's really nothing wrong with the graphics. A lot of people just love the artwork and the art design that was in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. And at this point, I have no idea on whether or not we're going to get a Marvel vs. Capcom 5 or a sequel to Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, because to be brutally honest, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite was overshadowed by Dragon Ball FighterZ, which came out back in 2018. And basically, that game was more like Marvel vs. Capcom 3, but slightly better, depending on who you ask, because it had a story mode and it pretty much had various arcs that people could play through, and the replay value of that game was really high. Dragon Ball FighterZ was probably one of the best crossover fighting games of the teens decade, but unfortunately, I feel like it overshadowed Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. Not to say that Infinite is a bad game or anything, but at the same time, it was a pretty solid game. It doesn't get talked about as much as it should. A lot of people wonder whether or not the game's gonna be released for Nintendo Switch in the future, but Capcom has never taken any action to make that happen, so it kind of seems unlikely at the moment. But I wouldn't necessarily go on record and say that the Marvel vs. Capcom series is dead just yet. Maybe a short hiatus is what the series need until, I guess, people have a demand to see a sequel to Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. But nowadays, like the gaming world is way more competitive, and you look at the fighting genre, it's like you have a lot more developers, like video game developers, getting in the mix and releasing high profile blockbuster games. So Capcom's definitely going to have to step up their game in order to make a sequel for Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite appealing to casuals and the masses. But I don't think it's a task that, they're not up to or anything like that. But I would definitely not go on record and say, yeah, the series is dead. I do feel that the series just needs a break for a while, because you look at Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and when Marvel vs. Capcom 3 came out, the series was on a hiatus for like over a decade. And when they released Marvel vs. Capcom 3, it was a game that exceeded many people's expectations from a commercial standpoint. And honestly, it breathed new life into the series itself. So maybe that's something that we're going to have to just wait for. And that's probably something that the series needs. The series needs to go on a break probably for a while. But I don't think that the Marvel vs. Capcom series is dead. And I do feel that we'll definitely get another game somewhere down the line. But as it currently stands, Capcom's top priorities right now is Resident Evil and the Monster Hunter series, especially because those two video game series is like the best thing that Capcom has going along with the Street Fighter series.